My 6-year-old daughter and I were eating dinner at a family shelter when a black sedan pulled into the parking lot. An elderly woman stepped out, looked through the window, and froze. She walked in and said, "Why aren't you living in your house on Birchwood Lane?" I blinked. What house? I didn't raise my voice. I made a phone call. 3 days later, I walked into my parents' anniversary party, and my mother's face went white. My name is Serena Mitchell. I'm 29. I'm a second-grade teacher and a single mom. And this is the story of how my own parents stole a house from under me and cashed rent checks for 2 years while my daughter and I slept on a shelter cot. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. Now, let me take you back to last January. The week I lost my apartment and everything I thought I knew about my family started to unravel. The letter came on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were Lily's library days, and she'd come home with her backpack stuffed with picture books she couldn't wait to show me. That afternoon, while she was spreading them across the kitchen table of our one-bedroom apartment on Division Street, I stood at the counter reading a 30-day notice to vacate. The building had been sold. New ownership. All tenants out by February 15th. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it, slid it into the clear plastic folder I kept our important documents in, and sat down next to Lily. "Which one first tonight?" I said. She held up a book about a bear building a house in the woods. Of course she did. That night, after she fell asleep, I did the math on the back of a grocery receipt. First month, last month, security deposit. $4,200 minimum for anything in Portland that wouldn't put me further from Lily's school. I had $1,100 in savings. My last child support check from Marcus had bounced in October, and the one before that never came at all. I called my mother. "Mom, I need help. Just temporary. A few weeks, until I find a new place. Lily and I can share a room." Diane Mitchell paused the way she always paused before delivering a no, long enough that you'd start hoping. "Honey, we don't have the room. Kyle and Brenna are staying with us right now. You know how it is." Kyle, my older brother, 33 years old, employed full-time at a logistics company with a wife who sold real estate, staying in my parents' 4-bedroom house. "Can Lily at least stay with you while I figure things out?" "That wouldn't be fair to Kyle's kids." I didn't argue. I never argued. I said, "Okay, Mom," the way I'd been saying it my whole life, and I hung up. 3 days later, Lily and I checked into the Maplewood family shelter on Powell Boulevard with 2 suitcases and a stuffed bear named Captain. The intake worker handed me a sheet of rules and a room number. The hallway smelled like industrial bleach and someone else's spaghetti sauce. The fluorescent light above our door buzzed at a frequency I'd hear in my sleep for the next 2 months. Lily looked up at me. "Is this a hotel, Mom?" "It's temporary, baby." I believed that. I had to. The beds were metal-framed bunks with mattresses wrapped in vinyl. Lily took the top because she said it was like a treehouse. I lay below her, staring at the underside of the slats, listening to her shift and sigh and shift again. "Mommy, the light makes a noise." She meant the fluorescent tube in the hall. It hummed through the gap under our door, a thin electric whine that never stopped. "Close your eyes, Lily. I'll tell you a story." I made one up about a girl who could talk to foxes. I don't remember the plot. I just remember that by the time I ran out of words, Lily's breathing had gone slow and even, and the hallway was quiet except for that hum and, somewhere down the corridor, a woman crying softly behind a closed door. I did not sleep. I lay there and thought the thing I could never say out loud. She's going to remember this. Not the story about the foxes. This. The bunk. The buzzing light. The smell. Someday she'll be old enough to understand what a family shelter is, and she'll know that her mother couldn't provide a home. That thought sat on my chest like a stone. The next morning, a woman with warm brown eyes and a lanyard that read, Priya Okafor, case manager, knocked on our door at 8:15. "Serena, I've been assigned to your case. Can we talk?" Priya was professional, but not cold. She walked me through housing waitlists, emergency assistance programs, Section 8 timelines. She didn't sugarcoat anything. When I asked, How long do most families stay here? She paused, just a beat, and said, It varies, but I'll make sure you have everything you need to get out as fast as possible. That night, I texted my mother a photo of Lily's artwork from school, a rainbow over a house. Diane replied 3 hours later at 9:47 p.m. Stop being dramatic. Lots of people go through hard times. I stared at the screen. Then I screenshotted the message, saved it to my phone, and put it in a new album I labeled Records. I didn't know why yet. I just knew I should keep it. Here's what a day looked like. 5:30. Alarm on my phone, volume low so I wouldn't wake the family in the next room. Shower in the communal bathroom. Lukewarm water. No lock on the stall. Flip-flops I bought at the dollar store because the tile had a film on it I didn't want to think about. Dress Lily, braid her hair with a comb I kept in my purse because I'd learned fast that anything left in the bathroom disappeared. Drop her at the before-school program by 7:15. Drive 12 minutes to Maplewood Elementary, a Title I school where I taught second graders who sometimes came in hungry, which meant I kept a drawer of granola bars in my desk. Teach all day. Pick Lily up by 4. Back at the shelter by 5. Every evening, Lily drew. She drew constantly. The shelter had a donated bin of crayons, half of them broken, most of them some shade of brown. And Lily used every single one. She drew flowers, dogs, rainbows, but mostly she drew houses. Houses with big windows, houses with yards, houses with trees and a path to the door and smoke coming out of the chimney, even though it was January in Portland and our last apartment didn't have a fireplace. I watched her draw those houses and I felt something crack behind my ribs every time. One night, after she was asleep, I sat on the bottom bunk with a notepad and did the math again. Deposit plus first and last, $4,200. Current savings, $1,100. Gap, $3,100 I did not have. I texted Kyle, Can you help me with the deposit? I'll pay you back within 6 months. He replied the next morning, Sorry sis, we're tight right now. Mom said you should apply for Section 8. I put my phone down, opened Instagram. Kyle's most recent post, a photo of a brand new silver Chevy Tahoe, captioned upgraded, #blessed. I didn't reply to his text. I screenshot the post, added it to the records album, and went to read Lily her bedtime story. My mother came to the shelter 3 weeks after Lily and I moved in. She brought a plastic bag of Kyle's kids' hand-me-downs, shirts with stains on the collars, jeans with frayed knees, and a smile wide enough for the front desk staff to see. I'm Lily's grandmother, she told the intake coordinator, signing the visitor log with her looping cursive. I just wanted to drop off some things for my grandbaby. She found us in the common room. Lily was drawing. Diane swept in, arms open, voice pitched high. There's my girl. Grandma's here. Lily hugged her. The intake coordinator smiled from the doorway. I watched Diane perform warmth like a woman who'd rehearsed it in the car. When the coordinator left, Diane's smile thinned. Serena, we need to talk. She sat across from me, handbag in her lap, and lowered her voice to the register she used when she wanted me to know she was serious. I've been thinking, if this situation keeps up, the shelter, the instability, I might need to talk to the court about Lily's living arrangement. My blood went cold. She was talking about the supplemental guardianship. When Marcus and I divorced, the family court had appointed Diane as a temporary supplemental guardian for Lily, a formality, they said, while I stabilized my housing. It gave Diane no custody, but it gave her standing. Standing to file motions, standing to request evaluations, standing to say, Your Honor, my daughter is living in a shelter. That's no place for a child. I'm not threatening you, she said, adjusting her collar. I'm just worried. As her legal guardian, supplemental guardian, I said. Same thing. It wasn't the same thing, but I didn't have a lawyer to explain why. Diane stood, kissed Lily on the forehead, and said, loud enough for the hallway, Be good for Mommy, okay? Grandma loves you so much. She signed the visitor log on her way out. Date, February 3rd. Time, 4:20 p.m. That night, I started a handwritten journal. Date, event, What was said? Who was present? I didn't have a name for what my mother was doing. I just knew it needed to be written down. I found a studio apartment on Stark Street, 600 square feet, 1 block from a bus line. The landlord said he'd hold it for 72 hours if I could put down $2,000. That was the gap between my daughter drawing houses on a shelter floor and my daughter sleeping in a real bed in a room I could lock behind us. I called my mother one last time. Mom, I found a place. I just need $2,000 for the deposit. I'll pay you back from my tax refund in March. That's 6 weeks. Diane sighed, the long theatrical sigh she'd been perfecting since I was 12. Serena, your father and I are on a fixed income. We simply don't have it. 2 weeks earlier, she'd accidentally sent a photo to the family group chat before deleting it. I caught it before it disappeared. Robert leaning against a new Ford F-150 in the driveway, grinning, holding up the keys. Fixed income. Mom, I'm asking for a loan, not a gift. The answer is no. And frankly, maybe this is God's way of telling you to be more responsible. I held the phone away from my face and pressed my knuckles to my mouth. I counted to 5. Then I put it back. Okay, Mom. I let the apartment go. That night, Lily tugged my sleeve while I was writing in my journal. Mom, when are we going home? Soon, baby. I didn't know what soon meant anymore. The word had gone soft and shapeless, like something left in the rain too long. After Lily fell asleep, I opened the clear plastic folder. It was thick now. The 30-day notice from Division Street, screenshots of Diane's texts, screenshots of Kyle's, the visitor log entry, my handwritten journal, receipts from my pay stubs, all of it organized with sticky tabs I'd taken from the supply closet at school. I didn't have a plan for any of it. I just had an instinct I couldn't name: keep everything. I closed the folder and slid it under my mattress. I thought I was out of options. I thought this was my life now. The hum of the hallway light, the vinyl mattress, the word temporary turning to cement in my mouth. I was wrong, because 3 days later a black sedan pulled into the shelter parking lot, and everything I believed about my family shattered like a plate on a tile floor. It was a Saturday, late afternoon. The common room smelled like canned tomato soup and the wet wool of someone's coat drying on a chair. Lily and I were at our usual table. She was drawing. I was pretending to grade papers while actually staring at my bank balance on my phone, when I heard a car door close in the parking lot. Through the window, I saw a black Lincoln Town Car. Not the kind of car that pulled into the Maplewood family shelter. An elderly woman stepped out. White hair cut short, camel-colored cashmere coat. She moved slowly but with purpose, the way people move when they've decided something. She reached the front entrance and looked through the glass. Her eyes swept the common room, past the bulletin board with its flyers for food pantries and legal aid, past the row of high chairs, past the woman folding laundry in the corner, and landed on me. She stopped. I stopped. I hadn't seen my grandmother in almost 2 years. She was thinner than I remembered. Her hair was shorter. But those eyes, sharp, gray-blue, the kind that didn't miss anything, those hadn't changed. She walked in. She crossed the room. She looked at Lily, then at me, then at the cot, visible through our open door, then back at me. Serena. Her voice cracked on the second syllable. What are you doing here? Grandma. She sat down. She took my hands. Hers were trembling. Why aren't you living in your house? On Birchwood Lane? The room tilted. I felt the fluorescent light buzzing above us like it had crawled inside my skull. What house? Evelyn Hargrove stared at me. I stared back. Lily looked up from her drawing and said, Hi. The way 6-year-olds say hi. Easy. Unbothered. Like the world hadn't just cracked open. My grandmother reached into her handbag and pulled out her phone. She opened a PDF and turned the screen toward me. I saw my name. I saw an address. I saw the words irrevocable trust and beneficiary, Serena Elaine Mitchell, and a date from 2 years ago. A trust deed. For a house. In my name. That I had never seen, never signed for. never been told about. I don't understand, I said. Evelyn's jaw tightened. Neither do I, but I intend to. Priya brought us coffee in paper cups and left the small meeting room without being asked. She read the situation the way good caseworkers do. One glance at my face, one at my grandmother's, and she closed the door behind her. Evelyn held the cup but didn't drink. After your grandfather passed, she said, I sold most of the properties, kept a few. One of them was a 3-bedroom on Birchwood Lane. I bought it with the idea that you and Lily would live there. She'd set up an irrevocable trust. I was the beneficiary. The house was mine, free and clear, no mortgage. She'd given the trust documents to Diane because Diane was her daughter, and she'd trusted her. Your mother told me you moved in last April. She sent me photographs of the kitchen, said you'd hung new curtains. My mother had never given me curtains. My mother had never given me an address. She told me you were happy, that Lily loved the backyard. I felt my pulse in my teeth. Grandma, I've never set foot in that house. I didn't know it existed until 60 seconds ago. Evelyn set her coffee down. Her hand was steady now. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Quiet. Precise. The voice of a woman who'd run a real estate business for 40 years and recognized fraud when she smelled it. And what did Diane tell you about me? I felt the floor tilt again. She said you wanted space. That after Grandpa died, you cut off contact. That you didn't want to hear from us. I changed my phone number when I moved to Lake Oswego. I gave your mother the new one. Evelyn paused. Only your mother. The room was very quiet. She told me you were in California, I whispered. Assisted living. Evelyn almost smiled, but it was the kind of smile that had glass in it. I'm 78 years old, Serena. I live 12 miles from here, and I have been sending birthday cards to this shelter's zip code for 2 years, believing they were reaching a house. She pulled up a text thread on her phone, messages from Diane, dated months apart. Serena loves the house. Mom. Thank you so much. Lily's room is painted yellow, her favorite color. And then, a photograph. A sunny kitchen with blue curtains and a fruit bowl on the counter. Evelyn turned the phone toward me. Do you recognize this kitchen? I didn't. Because it wasn't mine. I'd later learn, when Gerald ran a reverse image search, that it was a stock photo from a home staging website, downloaded and cropped to look personal. My mother had built a fake life for me, complete with curtains and fruit bowls, and fed it to my grandmother piece by piece, while my real life played out on a vinyl mattress under a buzzing fluorescent light. Evelyn looked at me. Then who has been living in that house for 2 years? I didn't need to answer. We both knew. I called my mother that night from the shelter parking lot. Lily was inside with Priya, coloring, safe. The February air cut through my coat. I turned on my phone's voice recorder before I dialed. Oregon is a one-party consent state. I'd looked it up during my lunch break. Diane picked up on the 4th ring. Serena, it's late. Mom, I saw Grandma today. Silence. Not the normal kind. The kind that has weight. That's impossible. She's in assisted living in California. She was here, at the shelter. She showed me a trust deed for a house on Birchwood Lane. In my name. I could hear her breathing change, faster, shallower. But when she spoke, her voice was smooth, rehearsed. I don't know what you're talking about. Your grandmother is confused, Serena. She has memory issues. You know that. I didn't know that, because it wasn't true. Evelyn Hargrove had recited dates, dollar amounts, and lease terms from memory less than 3 hours ago, without hesitating once. Mom, who is living in that house? Serena, I think you need to calm down. You're stressed from the shelter situation. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking clearly enough to read a trust deed. I'm going to call your grandmother and straighten this out. Don't do anything rash. Her voice dropped half a register. You know how courts feel about unstable mothers. There it was. The weapon. Loaded and aimed in under 2 minutes. I let the silence stretch. Then I said, "Good night, Mom." I hung up, stopped the recording, saved the file, added it to the records album on my phone. I stood in the parking lot for a long time. My breath made clouds in the cold air. A bus passed on Powell, its headlights sweeping across the wet asphalt. She'd called me unstable. She'd called my grandmother confused. She had an answer for everything, a smooth, practiced, immediate answer. Except the address on that deed. And that told me everything I needed to know. I walked back inside, checked on Lily, asleep already, Captain tucked under her chin, and opened my journal. I wrote one line. She knows. She's not confused. She's not sorry. She's scared. And for the first time since I'd checked into this shelter, I wasn't the one who was afraid. I lay in the dark that night, listening to Lily breathe above me, replaying that phone call in my head. My mother didn't stammer. She didn't hesitate. She didn't even ask if Lily was okay. She just denied, smoothly, like she'd been practicing for it. And I kept thinking, how many times has she done this? How many times did I believe her without question? Have you ever had that moment where the person you trusted most turns out to be the one who lied the longest? Tell me in the comments. I want to know I'm not the only one. I couldn't sleep, so I did what I always do when my brain won't quiet. I went backward. I thought about summer camp. Kyle went every year. Camp Tillamook, the one with the ropes course and the lake. I stayed home and helped Diane clean the house because someone has to, Serena, and Kyle needs the experience. I was 9. I thought about the car. Kyle got a used Honda on his 18th birthday. When I turned 18, Diane said, "Get a job, honey. That's the real gift." I laughed because I thought she was joking. She wasn't. I thought about college. I got accepted to Oregon State with a partial scholarship. Diane said, "Are you sure you can afford the rest?" Kyle dropped out of community college halfway through his second semester. Diane said, "He's finding himself." I thought about my wedding. Small, backyard, paid for by Marcus and me. Diane didn't contribute because they were saving for Kyle's wedding. Kyle wasn't engaged. He wasn't even dating anyone seriously. I thought about my divorce. I called Diane 3 days after Marcus left, asking if she could help with the attorney retainer. "You need to handle this yourself, Serena. We can't keep rescuing you." She had never rescued me, not once. When Kyle divorced his first wife 2 years earlier, Diane paid his lawyer in full, $2,400. I know because she told the entire family at Thanksgiving, framing it as a sacrifice. Lying on that shelter bunk, I finally saw the pattern for what it was. It was never about money. It was never about room. There was always money for Kyle. There was always room for Kyle. The answer was only no when I was the one asking. And it had been that way for as long as I could remember. I wasn't the black sheep. I was the invisible one. The daughter they kept around, so the family portrait looked complete. The next morning, Evelyn called and asked me to come to her house in Lake Oswego. Priya offered to stay with Lily at the shelter. She had a half day and said she didn't mind. I think she could see something shifting behind my eyes and wanted to make sure I had room for it. Evelyn's house was a modest craftsman on a tree-lined street. Not flashy. That was her way. She met me at the door with tea already poured and a man sitting at her dining table. "Serena, this is Gerald Whitfield. He was your grandfather's attorney for 23 years. I called him last night." Gerald was 62, gray-bearded, calm in the way that people who read contracts for a living tend to be calm. He shook my hand and opened a leather folder. "I ran a search on the Multnomah County Recorder's Office database this morning," he said. "Your property at 1847 Birchwood Lane currently has a tenant. The lease was filed by Diane Mitchell, signing as..." He turned a printed page toward me. "Authorized agent for S. Mitchell." I looked at the signature line. It said S. Mitchell in handwriting that was close to mine, but not mine. The loops were wrong. The capital S leaned too far right. "She forged my signature?" "It appears so." Gerald slid another page across the table. A spreadsheet he'd put together from county and bank records. Monthly rent collected, $2,200. Duration, 24 months. I did the math before he said it. $52,800, Gerald said, deposited into an account held jointly by Diane and Robert Mitchell. None of it transferred to you. None of it reported to the trust. Evelyn set her teacup down. She did not cry. She did not raise her voice. But her eyes, those sharp gray-blue eyes, went hard in a way I'd never seen. My own daughter, she said quietly, stealing from a 6-year-old. I stared at the number. $52,800. That was the deposit for the apartment I lost. That was 2 years of stability I never had. That was clothes for Lily that weren't hand-me-downs with stains on the collars. That was every night I lay awake on a vinyl mattress, doing math on the back of a receipt, coming up short. All of it, in Diane's account. Every cent. Gerald closed the folder. There's more, he said. I looked up. She also took out a home equity line of credit on the property, in your name. The room went very still. Gerald explained it the way you explain a wound, carefully but without pretending it didn't bleed. A home equity line of credit. $35,000. Opened 14 months ago using forged documents. My name, my social security number, my supposed signature. The application listed my occupation as property manager, which I was not, and my address as 1847 Birchwood Lane, where I had never lived. Where did the money go? I asked. Gerald turned to the next page. Bank statements, not mine. Diane and Robert's joint checking account. He'd highlighted the withdrawals in yellow. $12,000 to a home renovation contractor. Diane and Robert's kitchen remodel. The one she'd posted photos of on Facebook last summer, captioning it, "Finally got my dream kitchen. Blessed. $8,000 to Visa. Credit card debt. $5,000 to a Ford dealership. Down payment on Robert's F-150. And $10,000. A single transfer, dated June 14th, to an account belonging to Kyle Mitchell. The same month Kyle posted the new Tahoe on Instagram. The same month Kyle texted me, "Sorry sis, we're tight right now." That's $87,800 total, Gerald said. Rent plus the HELOC draw, taken from your property, without your knowledge or consent. I gripped the edge of Evelyn's dining table. The wood was smooth and cool under my fingers. $87,800, while Lily drew pictures of houses she didn't have, while I ate canned soup at a folding table under fluorescent lights, while my mother told me this was God's way of telling you to be more responsible. Gerald looked at me over his reading glasses. This is fraud, Serena. Forgery. Theft by deception. We can go to the police. We can file a civil suit. Or both. Evelyn reached across the table and put her hand over mine. What do you want to do? I didn't answer immediately. I sat with it. The number. The forged signatures. Kyle's Tahoe. Diane's dream kitchen. Robert's truck. All of it built on a house my grandmother gave me so my daughter would have a home. Then I said, I want my daughter to have her house. I want every dollar back. And I want them to know, in front of everyone, exactly what they did. Evelyn nodded once. Gerald picked up his pen. I went back to the shelter that night and pulled the clear plastic folder out from under my mattress. It was already thick. Now it needed to become a case. I bought a 3-ring binder from the dollar store. Blue, the only color they had, and a pack of tabbed dividers. I sat on my bunk after Lily fell asleep and built it section by section. Tab 1, the trust deed. Evelyn had given me a certified copy from Gerald's office, embossed seal, notarized, every page initialed, my name in black ink. The date, April 23rd, 2 years ago. Tab 2, property records. County recorder search showing 1847 Birchwood Lane, the lien record, the HELOC filing. Tab 3, the forged lease. S. Mitchell, in handwriting that wasn't mine, authorizing a rental agreement I'd never seen. Tab 4, screenshots. Diane's texts. Stop being dramatic. Lots of people go through hard times. Kyle's text. Sorry sis, we're tight right now. Kyle's Instagram, the Tahoe, #blessed. The photo Diane accidentally sent to the group chat. Robert with the F-150 keys. All time-stamped, all saved. Tab 5. The phone recording. Diane's voice, smooth and steady, calling my grandmother confused, calling me unstable, invoking the court. Tab 6. My shelter journal. Every entry dated, timed, and detailed. Diane's visit. Her words about the guardianship. The visitor log she'd signed. Gerald added 2 more items the next day. The reverse image search results. Diane's, Serena's kitchen photo, was a stock image from a staging company's website used in 11 other listings, and Priya's affidavit, notarized, confirming that Serena Mitchell and her minor daughter Lily had resided at the Maplewood family shelter since January 17th, that Ms. Mitchell was a cooperative and responsible parent, and that the child was safe, healthy, and well cared for. I held the binder in my lap. It was heavy. This wasn't revenge. Revenge was messy and loud and emotional. This was documentation. And I was a teacher. I graded papers for a living. I knew how to organize evidence. Gerald drove me to Birchwood Lane on a Wednesday morning. I'd taken a personal day, told the front office I had an appointment, which was technically true. The street was quiet, residential. Birch trees lined both sides, still bare from winter but already beginning to show the faintest green at the tips. The houses were older craftsman-style homes, covered porches, steep roofs, the kind of neighborhood where people left strollers on the front steps because they felt safe enough. Number 1847 had a white picket fence, a small front yard with winter jasmine starting to bloom along the walkway, blue shutters, a porch light that was still on, even though it was 10 in the morning. Gerald knocked. A young woman opened the door, late 20s, holding a coffee mug, surprised to find a silver-haired man in a suit on her porch. "Good morning. My name is Gerald Whitfield. I'm an attorney representing the legal owner of this property. May I speak with you for a moment?" She called her husband. They stood in the doorway, confused but polite. They'd been renting for 22 months. They paid $2,200 a month to a woman named Diane who said she owned the house. "She told us it was her investment property," the husband said. "She seemed normal. Nice, even." Gerald took notes. They showed him their lease. The same forged signature, the same S. Mitchell. Gerald photographed every page. I stayed on the sidewalk. I couldn't bring myself to go inside. Not yet. But I looked through the front window and saw a small room to the left. A bedroom. Empty, except for built-in shelves under the window. That room was the right size for a twin bed, a drawing table, and a bookshelf. It was the room I'd imagined for Lily every night for 2 years without knowing it existed. In the backyard, visible through the fence, there was a tire swing hanging from an oak tree. The tenant said it was there when they moved in. Lily would have loved it. She would have loved all of it. I turned away before I started to cry. Gerald was already on the phone with his office. "The tenants are cooperating," he said to me as we walked back to the car. "They're victims in this too. They paid rent in good faith to someone who had no authority to collect it. We'll give them proper notice. 60 days. We'll handle this by the book." By the book. I held on to those words like a railing on a staircase I wasn't sure I could climb. Gerald laid it out at Evelyn's dining table the next afternoon. Legal pad, numbered list, pen that probably cost more than my weekly groceries. Step 1. Notice to vacate to the current tenants. 60 days, per Oregon statute. They've been cooperative. I don't anticipate a problem. Step 2. Evelyn, as grantor of the irrevocable trust, executes a trust amendment revoking Diane's informal access and designating a new successor trustee. I recommend myself, on an interim basis. Step 3. We file a fraud complaint with the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office, forgery in the first degree, theft by deception, identity theft related to the HELOC application. Step 4. Civil suit for restitution. Full recovery of $87,800 in misappropriated funds, plus costs. He looked up. "Questions?" "Yes," I said. "All of that. But there's one more thing." Evelyn, who had been listening with her hands folded in her lap, looked at me and said, "The party." Next Saturday was Diane and Robert's 35th wedding anniversary. The invitations had gone out weeks ago. Printed cardstock, gold lettering. Diane had booked the catering herself. The entire extended family would be there. Cousins, aunts, uncles, church friends, neighbors. 30 people. Maybe more. 30 people who had spent years hearing Diane's version of me, the struggling daughter, the drama queen, the one who never appreciated her parents. 30 people who had nodded sympathetically when Diane said, "I've done everything for that girl." "She's spent years building that story," I said. "I want every person in that room to hear the real one. Not because I want to embarrass her. Because I'm tired of being asked why I never appreciate my parents." Gerald considered this. "I can prepare a formal demand letter, summary of findings, notice of legal action, restitution terms, in a certified envelope. You could deliver it at the event." "Hand-delivered," I said, to her face. Evelyn looked at Gerald. Gerald looked at me. "I'll have it ready by Friday," he said. Evelyn reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'll make sure we're both invited." Before anything else, I had to remove the chain my mother had wrapped around my throat. Gerald filed a motion to terminate the supplemental guardianship on Monday morning. The grounds were clean. I had stable employment. I had a verified residence incoming, 1847 Birchwood Lane, documented in the trust. I had a support network, including Evelyn, and the current supplemental guardian, Diane, had an active fraud investigation creating a disqualifying conflict of interest. Priya's affidavit went in with the filing. So did a letter from Lily's school counselor confirming regular attendance and normal development. So did my pay stubs. So did the shelter's case file showing consistent cooperation and responsible parenting. The hearing was Thursday. Diane was not notified in advance. Gerald filed under expedited procedure, citing the conflict of interest. Without opposition, the judge reviewed the packet in chambers. I was grading spelling tests in the staff room during my lunch break when the email came through. Order terminating supplemental guardianship. Case number 24-FG-01127. Sole legal and physical custody of the minor child LEM is hereby restored to the petitioner, Serena E. Mitchell, effective immediately. I read it once, twice, 3 times. Then I put my head down on the table between a stack of second-grade worksheets and a cold cup of coffee, and I cried. Silently. There were teachers in the next room. But the tears ran down my wrists and onto the formica. For over a year, I had walked on glass around my mother because she held that guardianship like a grenade. You know how courts feel about unstable mothers. Every time I thought about pushing back, I heard that voice. Not anymore. I wiped my face before the bell rang, washed my hands in the staff bathroom, went back to my classroom and taught long division to 22 7-year-olds. That evening, Gerald sent me the final version of the certified letter. 4 pages. Summary of fraud. Demand for restitution. Notice of legal proceedings. Printed on firm letterhead, sealed in a white envelope stamped in red. Certified mail. I held it in my hands. It weighed almost nothing. It was going to weigh a great deal more on Saturday. Evelyn came to the shelter on Friday. She signed the visitor log the same way Diane had, only this time, the visit was real. Lily was shy at first. She hid behind my leg and peeked out the way she did with strangers, which, in a way, Evelyn was. The last time they'd been in the same room, Lily was barely 4. Evelyn didn't push. She sat down at the common room table, set her handbag on the floor, and pulled out a box. Wooden, polished, with a brass latch. She opened it. 48 colored pencils. Not crayons. Pencils. The kind with soft, rich pigment that didn't break when you pressed too hard. Each one sharpened to a perfect point. "I heard you like to draw," Evelyn said, setting the box on the table between them. "Can you show me?" Lily's eyes went wide. She slid out from behind me, sat down across from Evelyn, and ran her fingers over the pencils the way you'd touch something you weren't sure was allowed to be yours. "I can use these?" "They're yours." Lily picked a violet, then a green, Then she began to draw, the way she always drew. Fast, sure, tongue poking out of the corner of her mouth. She drew a house. Of course she did. It had a big window, a front path, a tree in the yard, and in the back, a circle hanging from a branch. A swing. Evelyn looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't let the tears fall. Not in front of Lily. "This is the house I want to live in," Lily said, holding up the drawing. Evelyn studied it for a long time. Then she said, very gently, "Can I tell you something, Lily? You already have a house. And we're going to bring you there. I promise." Lily glanced at me. I nodded. "Grandma keeps her promises," I said. Evelyn leaned close to me while Lily returned to her drawing. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I lost 2 years with her. I won't lose another day." I folded Lily's drawing carefully and put it in the blue binder, behind the last tab. It didn't fit with the rest of the documents, the deeds, the statements, the forged signatures. But it belonged there more than any of them. It was the reason for all of it. Saturday morning, the day of the party. Lily slept in. I'd been awake since 4. I sat on the edge of my bunk in the blue-gray dark and went through the binder one more time, tab by tab. Court order, check. Certified letter, check. Trust deed, check. Screenshots printed at the library, 4 to a page, check. Phone recording transferred to a USB drive Priya had lent me, in case anyone asked to hear it, check. Reverse image search printout, check. Everything in order, everything documented. Everything numbered and dated the way I numbered and dated lesson plans, because if I'd learned one thing from teaching 2nd grade, it was this: if it isn't written down, it didn't happen. Priya stopped by the room at 7. She was off duty but had volunteered to watch Lily tonight. She'd take her to Evelyn's house before the party started. Lily would not be at that anniversary dinner. I'd made sure of it. "You okay?" Priya asked from the doorway. "I'm terrified." She leaned against the frame. "Good. That means you care enough to do it right." I tried on my outfit in the communal bathroom. White blouse, the one I wore for parent-teacher conferences. Black slacks. A dark blazer Priya had lent me, slightly too big in the shoulders. No jewelry. No makeup except the lipstick I found at the bottom of my purse, half used. I looked at myself in the mirror above the sink. A woman in borrowed clothes, standing in a shelter bathroom. The fluorescent light hummed overhead, the same hum that had followed me every night for 2 months. Tomorrow, I told myself, I wouldn't hear that sound. Tomorrow, or the day after, or the week after. Lily and I would be somewhere else, somewhere with walls that belonged to us and a door that locked from the inside. But first, there was tonight. I put the binder in my bag, zipped it shut, walked back to my room. Lily was awake, sitting up on the top bunk, Captain in her lap. "Where are you going, Mommy?" "To see some family, baby. Priya's going to take you to Grandma Gigi's house tonight. You'll have a sleepover." Her face lit up. "Can I bring my pencils?" "Of course." I kissed her forehead. She smelled like the coconut shampoo I bought at the drugstore because it was the one thing I refused to compromise on. My daughter would always smell like something good. I picked up my bag. The binder shifted inside. Heavy. Ready. My hands were shaking, but my head was clear. The text from my cousin Rachel came at 2 in the afternoon, while I was braiding Lily's hair for the sleepover. "Hey, heads up. Your mom's been telling everyone at church that you're struggling with mental health issues, and she's been supporting you financially for months, but you keep pushing her away. People are eating it up. Uncle Tom gave a whole speech about it at Bible study. Just thought you should know." I read it twice. Then I put my phone down and finished the braid. I wasn't surprised. This was Diane's playbook. The preemptive strike. By the time I walked into that party, 30 people would already believe I was ungrateful, unstable, and probably on something. Diane would hug me in front of them and they'd think she was a saint for even inviting me. I'd watched her do this my whole life. The only difference was that this time I knew the script in advance. I texted Rachel back. "I don't believe her, by the way," she'd added. Something always felt off. "Are you okay?" I'm fine, I wrote. Are you coming to the party tonight? Yeah. Good. Keep your phone charged. I called Gerald. He confirmed. Letter ready. Originals in his office safe. Copies in the binder I was carrying. He'd be on standby by phone in case Diane's attorney tried anything on the spot. I called Evelyn. She'd arrive separately. Her driver would bring her at 6:30. She hadn't told Diane she was coming. The invitation had been routed through Kyle, who Evelyn had called and said, I'd like to surprise your mother for the anniversary. Don't spoil it. Kyle, apparently, had said, That's so sweet, Grandma. And Priya was already at the shelter, overnight bag in hand, coloring books under one arm, ready to take Lily to Lake Oswego as soon as I left. I knelt down and held Lily's face in my hands. Have fun tonight, okay? Draw something for Grandma Gigi. I'll draw her house, Lily said. That sounds perfect. I let go. I picked up my bag. I walked out of the Maplewood family shelter into the late afternoon rain, and I got in my car, and I drove toward my parents' house with a blue binder and a certified letter and absolutely nothing left to lose. My parents' house was lit up like a stage set. Every window glowed. The driveway was lined with cars. Through the front bay window, I could see people milling with plates and glasses. Aunts, uncles, cousins, church friends. The anniversary banner hung across the living room wall in gold cursive. Happy 35th, Diane and Robert. I sat in my car for 90 seconds, counted my breaths, felt the weight of the bag on the passenger seat. Then I got out. The front door was open. I stepped inside, and the smell hit me first. Catered lasagna, garlic bread, Diane's signature lemon cake that she always made for events where she wanted people to say she was wonderful. 30-some faces turned. I felt the shift, the way a room recalibrates when the person they've been discussing walks in. I saw it in the micro-expressions. Pity from Aunt Mary, discomfort from Uncle Tom, a tight smile from Kyle's wife Brenna, who immediately looked at her shoes. These people had been briefed. They knew I was struggling. They knew Diane was doing her best. They'd already chosen a side, and they'd chosen it on a lie. Kyle stood in the far corner near the buffet table holding a beer, not meeting my eyes. And then Diane came out of the kitchen. She wore a cream blouse, pearls, fresh blowout, the full anniversary armor. When she saw me, her smile froze for exactly 1/2 second. Then it reconfigured into something warm and generous, performance grade. Serena, honey, I'm so glad you came. She crossed the room, arms wide, and pulled me into a hug that smelled like Chanel No. 5 and hairspray. I did not hug her back. My arms stayed at my sides. Hi, Mom. She held me by the shoulders, smiled for the room, and leaned in close. Behave yourself tonight, Serena. Don't you dare make a scene in front of our guests. Her whisper was warm on my ear. Her grip was tight on my shoulders. I looked her in the eye. I wouldn't dream of it. She released me, smoothed her blouse, turned back to her guests, and then the doorbell rang. Robert opened it, and there, framed in the porch light, stood Evelyn Hargrove, 5'3", white hair, cashmere coat, 78 years old, and absolutely not in California. Diane's face went white, not pale, white. The color of paper, the color of surrender. Mother, she whispered. Surprise, Evelyn said. The room came alive the way rooms do when the matriarch enters. Evelyn Hargrove was not a woman people forgot. She'd built a real estate business with her late husband from nothing, funded college scholarships for 2 nephews, and still sent handwritten Christmas cards every year to 46 people. When she walked in, people straightened. Evelyn, oh my God, we haven't seen you in years. Aunt Mary was first, then Uncle Tom, then cousins I couldn't name. They circled her. Hugs, handshakes, genuine warmth. Evelyn received each one graciously, the way a woman accustomed to being respected moves through a room. I stood near the hallway and watched my mother. Diane hadn't moved from the kitchen doorway. Her hand was on the frame. Her knuckles were pale. Evelyn made her way through the well-wishers and finally reached Diane. She embraced her lightly, one arm, a polite pat on the back. Diane, you look well. How's everything? Diane's voice came out too bright. Mom, what a surprise. I thought you were, I mean, I didn't know you were. In California? Evelyn said. She smiled. No. I moved back to Lake Oswego last year. She turned to the room, still smiling. Didn't Diane tell you? Several people glanced at Diane. Diane laughed, a short, clipped sound. I must have forgotten to mention it. Evelyn accepted a glass of water from Robert, who looked like he'd rather be holding a shovel to dig himself underground. She settled into an armchair near the buffet table, and the room settled around her. Then, with the tone of someone making pleasant conversation, Evelyn said, So, have any of you been to Serena's house on Birchwood Lane? The one I gave her? The room went quiet. Not dramatic. Quiet. Confused quiet. The kind of quiet where people look at each other to confirm they heard what they just heard. Diane crossed the room fast. Mom, let's not talk about real estate right now. It's a party. Evelyn took a sip of her water. Of course. I just assumed everyone knew. I bought it for Serena and Lily 2 years ago. A 3-bedroom. Lovely street. She looked at me across the room. Serena, have you been enjoying it? Every pair of eyes in the room swiveled to me, and then to Diane, and then back to me. I said nothing. I didn't need to. The silence was doing my work for me. Diane's neck flushed red from the collar of her cream blouse, spreading upward like a stain. The murmuring started. Low. Uncertain. People looked at Diane for an explanation. Diane opened her mouth, but I stood up before she could fill the space with another lie. Since Grandma brought it up, I said, I think everyone in this room deserves the truth. My voice was steady. I don't know how, because my pulse was hammering so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. But I'd spent 2 months swallowing silence in a shelter, and I was done. I have never been inside that house. I didn't know it existed until 1 week ago. The murmuring stopped. Diane stepped forward. Serena, stop. You're confused. You've been under a lot of stress? I'm not confused, Mom. I kept my eyes on the room, not on her. I found out about the house because Grandma walked into the family shelter where Lily and I have been living for the past 2 months. 30 faces, 30 frozen expressions. Aunt Mary's hand went to her mouth. Uncle Tom's jaw actually dropped. I'd thought that was a figure of speech until I saw it happen. A woman from Diane's church group said, A shelter? The Maplewood Family Shelter, I said, on Powell Boulevard. Lily and I have been there since January 17th. Bunk beds, communal bathroom, canned soup for dinner. I let that sit. While the house Grandma bought for us, the one she gave to Mom to hand over, has been rented out. By Mom. For 2 years. Robert stood up from the couch. That is enough, Serena. I looked at him. He was red-faced, pointing at me with one thick finger. The universal gesture of a man who has no argument but plenty of volume. Sit down, Dad, I said. Quiet, level. I'm not done. He didn't sit. But he didn't speak again. Mom rented the house using a forged lease. My name, my signature, neither of which I gave. She collected $52,000 in rent. She took out a $35,000 home equity line of credit on the property. Also in my name, also without my knowledge. Total, $87,800. I said the number clearly. I wanted it in the air. I wanted every person in that room to feel the weight of it. All of it deposited into Mom and Dad's joint account, while my daughter drew pictures of houses she didn't have on the floor of a homeless shelter. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The anniversary banner hung behind Diane's head like a prop in a play that had gone terribly wrong. Diane's voice came out high and fractured. That is a lie. Mother, tell them she's lying. Evelyn set down her water glass. I wish she were. I reached into my bag. The room was so quiet I could hear the catered lasagna bubbling in its tray on the sideboard. Somewhere behind me, a phone buzzed once and stopped. Rachel, I'd learn later, already texting her sister. You need to call me right now. I pulled out the envelope. White. Legal-sized. The red certified mail stamp across the front was bright under the overhead light. "This," I said, "is a formal demand letter prepared by Gerald Whitfield, attorney at law, on behalf of myself and the Hargrove Family Trust." I set it on the table between the lemon cake and a vase of grocery store tulips. "It contains a certified copy of the trust deed, naming me as sole beneficiary of 1847 Birchwood Lane, a copy of the lease agreement you signed using a forgery of my signature, bank records showing $52,800 in rent deposited into your checking account over 24 months, HELOC statements showing $35,000 drawn against my property using fraudulent documents." I ticked them off the way I read a rubric to my second graders: calm, clear, no emotion wasted. "And a notice that a fraud complaint has been filed with the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office." Diane stared at the envelope. She didn't touch it. Her hands were at her sides, fingers curled, trembling. Robert's mouth was open, but nothing was coming out. I reached into the bag one more time and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "There's also this." I held it up. "A court order, issued last Thursday, terminating your supplemental guardianship of Lily, effective immediately. Sole custody has been restored to me." That was the one that broke her. Not the money, not the fraud charges, the guardianship, the leash she'd held over me for a year. "You can't do this," Diane whispered. Her voice was stripped now, raw. "I am your mother." I looked at her. My mother, in her cream blouse and pearls, standing in front of a banner celebrating 35 years of a marriage built in part on money stolen from her own granddaughter. "And I'm Lily's mother," I said. "That's the only title that matters to me right now." I set the court order on top of the envelope. Stepped back. "You had 2 years to do the right thing. You had 2 years to hand me that key. Instead, you watched your granddaughter sleep in a shelter. So no, you don't get to call yourself my mother tonight." The room didn't gasp. It was worse than that. It just absorbed. 30 people, standing in a living room decorated for celebration, absorbing the fact that the woman who baked the lemon cake had stolen a house from her own daughter. Diane cried. Not the quiet kind, not the kind you feel sorry for, the theatrical kind, the kind that turns outward, that reaches for an audience, that says, "Look what she's doing to me," without using those exact words. She pressed both hands to her chest and turned toward the room. You see? You see what she's doing? On our anniversary? After everything I've done for her, I raised her. I sacrificed everything." She looked at Aunt Mary. Mary didn't move. She looked at Uncle Tom. Tom looked at the floor. Robert stepped in front of Diane like a shield. "This family is falling apart because of you, Serena. You always had to make everything about yourself." I didn't respond to him. I turned to Rachel, who was standing near the bookshelf with her phone in her hand, and said, "Rach, do you mind reading these out loud?" I handed her my phone, open to the screenshot album. Rachel looked down. Her eyes moved across the screen. Then she read, clearly, steadily, the way someone reads testimony. Text from Diane Mitchell, January 24th, 9:47 p.m. "Stop being dramatic. Lots of people go through hard times." The room flinched. Text from Diane Mitchell, February 1st, 11:12 a.m. "The answer is no. And frankly, maybe this is God's way of telling you to be more responsible." Diane lunged forward. "Those are out of context." Text from Kyle Mitchell, January 28th, 8:03 a.m. "Sorry, sis, we're tight right now. Mom said you should apply for Section 8. Rachel lowered the phone and looked at her aunt. "Were you tight, Aunt Diane? Because those HELOC records say there was $35,000 sitting in your account when you told Serena you couldn't spare $2,000. Diane turned to Evelyn. The tears were real now, but they weren't the right kind. Not remorse, not shame. The tears of someone watching their story fall apart in real time. "Mother, please. I can explain everything. It was a misunderstanding." Evelyn didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "A misunderstanding does not come with a forged signature, Diane." The lemon cake sat untouched on the table, The tulips leaned sideways in their vase, and my mother stood in the middle of her own anniversary party, surrounded by 30 people who could no longer look her in the eye. Rachel didn't let it go. She turned to the corner of the room where Kyle had been standing all evening, silent, nursing the same beer. "Kyle," she said, "did you know about this?" Every head turned. Kyle's face was red. Not angry red, caught red. He shifted his weight and said, in a voice that tried very hard to sound casual, "I didn't know the details. I just thought Mom was managing some property for Grandma." "The HELOC records," I said, "show a $10,000 transfer to your personal account, dated June 14th, for the down payment on your Tahoe. The SUV, the hashtag blessed one, the one he posted on Instagram the same month he told me he was too tight to help with a deposit." Kyle opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I thought that was Mom's money. She said it was a loan from her savings." "It wasn't her money," Evelyn said from her chair. Her voice was even, factual, like a woman reading a balance sheet. "It was drawn from a line of credit taken out, fraudulently, on your sister's property. A property I purchased so that your niece would have a home. The 6-year-old who has been sleeping in a shelter." Kyle put his beer down on the mantel. He didn't pick it up again. Uncle Tom spoke for the first time since the beginning. His voice was thick. "Diane, I vouched for you. I told people in this room, in this family, that Serena was the problem, that she was ungrateful, that you were doing your best." He paused. "You made me a liar, Aunt Mary. I cannot believe this. You stole from your own grandchild." Diane's composure finally cracked. Not into sorrow, into defiance. "It's not stealing," she shouted. Her voice bounced off the walls. "It's family money. Mother gave it to me and I managed it the way I saw fit." "I gave it to Serena," Evelyn said. Quiet. Absolute. "I have never, in 78 years, been more ashamed of my own child." The room held that sentence like a held breath. Diane looked at the 30 faces that had smiled at her when she cut the cake, that had toasted her marriage, that had believed her for years, and found nothing. No sympathy, no rescue, no one to perform for. She turned and walked down the hallway to the bathroom. Robert followed. The door shut. The anniversary banner hung crooked above the empty buffet table, one corner drooping where the tape had given up. Nobody fixed it. I left the party before anyone started cleaning up. I drove to Evelyn's house, picked up a sleeping Lily from the guest room, carried her to the car, and buckled her in with Captain wedged between her and the seatbelt. She didn't wake up. On the drive back to the shelter. The last drive, I told myself? The very last one? My phone buzzed twice. Gerald, confirming the letter had been hand-delivered with Rachel and Tom as witnesses, and Priya, texting a photo of a drawing Lily had made at Evelyn's, a house with a yellow door and 3 stick figures out front. I saved both. The following week, Gerald did what Gerald does. He moved paper. Monday, civil suit filed in Multnomah County Circuit Court. Diane and Robert Mitchell, defendants. Claims: fraud, forgery, conversion, breach of fiduciary duty. Relief sought: full restitution of $87,800, plus attorney's fees and costs. Tuesday, fraud complaint formally received by the Multnomah County DA's office, case number assigned. Forgery in the first degree. An ORS 100-65.013 violation, Class C felony. Wednesday, Gerald's office notified the bank that issued the HELOC. Forged application. Unauthorized signatures. The bank froze the credit line within 48 hours and opened its own internal investigation. Diane and Robert were now on the hook for the $35,000 outstanding balance, and if they didn't pay, the bank would pursue its own criminal referral. Thursday, the 60-day notice to vacate reached its second week. The tenants at Birchwood Lane, decent people caught in Diane's lie, had already begun apartment hunting. No hard feelings. They'd gotten their deposit back from Gerald's office, funded by Evelyn, as a gesture of good faith. Gerald called me Friday evening. "Their attorney reached out today," he said. Used the word untenable. That's lawyer for, we're going to lose. I sat on my shelter bunk, for what I hoped would be one of the last times, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not happiness? Not yet. Something quieter. Traction. After 2 months of sinking, the ground under my feet was finally solid. Serena, Gerald said, you'll have your house by April. April. 2 months away. Lily's crayons, Lily's swing, Lily's room with the built-in shelves. 2 months. I could do 2 months. The call came 2 weeks after the party. Diane used Kyle's number. Mine was blocked, and she knew it. I almost didn't pick up, but something in me needed to hear her try. Serena. Her voice was different, smaller, stripped of its polish, its performance. Please, can we talk? You have 2 minutes. Drop the charges, please. We'll pay you back. All of it. I swear. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof. I can't sleep. The whole family won't speak to us. Pastor Reynolds asked us not to come to service until the situation is resolved. She drew a ragged breath. I'm begging you. I stood in the shelter hallway. The fluorescent light buzzed above me. Down the corridor, someone's toddler was laughing. The pure, helpless kind of laugh that doesn't know anything about fraud or forgery, or $35,000 credit lines. Mom, I said, you had 2 years, 730 days. Every single one of those days you could have called me and said, Serena, there's a house. It's yours. Here's the key. And every single one of those days, you chose not to. I know, but you watched me beg you for $2,000 while you sat on $87,000. You told me God was teaching me responsibility. You told Grandma I was living in that house. You told the family I was mentally ill. You used my daughter's guardianship to keep me quiet. Silence. So no, I said, I won't drop the charges. I'm your mother, Serena. Doesn't that mean anything? It meant everything to me, I said. That's why this hurts. But I have a daughter too, and she is never going to wonder whether her mother protected her. I heard Diane inhale to speak. I didn't wait. You didn't ruin this family, Mom. You just built it on a lie. I'm not destroying anything, I'm just turning on the lights. I hung up. I blocked Kyle's number. I walked to the common room. Lily was sitting at the table drawing with her colored pencils, the ones Evelyn had given her. She looked up. What are we drawing today? I asked, sitting down beside her. Our new house, she said. With the swing. I picked up a green pencil and started on the tree. Sometimes I wonder if my mother ever really saw me, not the version she described to relatives, the struggling one, the dramatic one, the one who never appreciates anything. Not the scapegoat. Just me. The woman who packed lunches at 5:30 in the morning, graded spelling tests on her lunch break, and never once asked for a single thing she wasn't owed. Do you think people like her ever change, or do they just find someone new to control? I honestly don't know. But I know what I chose. Tell me what you think. Drop it in the comments. 4 weeks after the anniversary party, Diane and Robert's attorney called Gerald and said the word, settle. Gerald walked me through the terms over the phone while I sat in the school parking lot during my planning period. Engine off, heater fading. Restitution. $52,800 in misappropriated rent, to be repaid over 36 months. $1,467 per month, deposited directly into a trust-managed account. First payment due in 30 days. HELOC. Diane and Robert would pay the $35,000 outstanding balance to the bank in full within 90 days. Failure to do so would trigger the bank's own criminal referral, separate from the DA's case. Kyle. $10,000 returned over 12 months, $833 per month. No exceptions, no deferrals. Criminal. The DA agreed to reduce the forgery charge from a Class C felony to a misdemeanor, contingent on full compliance with restitution and 3 years of supervised probation. Any missed payment would reactivate the felony charge. No contact order. Diane and Robert were prohibited from contacting me or Lily by any means. Phone, text, email, social media, third party. without prior written consent. Violation would result in arrest. Gerald read the final clause. Respondents acknowledge full responsibility for the actions described herein and waive any future claim to the property at 1847 Birchwood Lane. Do you accept? He asked. I looked through the windshield at the school building. Through the second-floor window, I could see my classroom, the one with the alphabet border and the drawer of granola bars, and the reading corner where I sat with 22 7-year-olds every afternoon. Yes, I said. I accept. Robert sold the F-150 the following week, got $28,000 for it. Diane was let go from the dental office. The practice manager cited conduct inconsistent with our values after the misdemeanor charge hit the public record. The tenant at Birchwood Lane moved out on March 29th, one day ahead of the 60-day deadline. They left the tire swing. Gerald called me that evening. The house is empty. It's yours. I signed the papers the next morning. A trust distribution confirmation, a new deed of trust, a key. One key. Silver. Warm in my hand. Justice didn't feel good. It wasn't supposed to. It felt right. And for the first time in over 2 years, something in my life felt exactly right. April 1st. Not a joke, not a dream. Portland rain, the soft kind, the kind that sounds like someone shushing a baby. Birch trees along the street had filled in since the last time I'd stood on this sidewalk, their pale trunks wrapped in the palest green. I turned the key. The door opened into a small foyer with hardwood floors and a coat hook by the door. Beyond it, a living room with built-in bookshelves and a window that faced the street. The kitchen was to the right, smaller than Diane's stock photo, but real. My kitchen, my counter, my window above the sink, looking out at the oak tree in the backyard. Lily pushed past me and stopped in the middle of the living room. She turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. The high ceilings, the fireplace, the light coming through the front window. Then she saw the backyard through the sliding door. "Mom, there's a swing!" She ran. I let her. Priya arrived 20 minutes later with the boxes from the shelter. There weren't many. 3 suitcases, a bag of Lily's art supplies, Captain the Bear, the blue binder which I set on the kitchen counter and decided to keep forever. Evelyn came after that, her driver carrying a box of kitchen essentials, pots, plates, dish towels, a kettle. She set a small vase of fresh daffodils on the counter and didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Lily's room was the small one on the left, built-in shelves under the window, just as I'd seen from the sidewalk. We set up the twin bed Evelyn had ordered, pushed it against the wall, arranged the colored pencils on the shelf. I took Lily's drawing, the one from the shelter, the house with the big window and the swing, and taped it to the wall above her bed. That night, for the first time in 74 days, I put my daughter to bed in her own room. I read her the fox story I'd made up on our first night at the shelter. She fell asleep before the end. I stood in the doorway and listened. No fluorescent hum, no stranger crying down the hall, no vinyl mattress crinkling, just rain on the roof and Lily's slow, steady breathing and the house settling around us like it had been waiting. I walked to my room, my bed, my door that locked from the inside. I lay down in the dark and I cried. But these weren't the shelter tears, the ones I swallowed so Lily wouldn't hear. These were different. These were the tears of a woman who had finally, after 2 years, stopped drowning. And the quiet was not the quiet of a shelter, where silence means someone is trying not to cry. It was the quiet of a home, where silence means everyone is safe. 6 months later, October. The birch trees on our street turned gold, and Lily said they looked like candles. She started 2nd grade at Fernwood Elementary, 5 minutes on foot. I walked her every morning and picked her up every afternoon. On Fridays, she brought home a folder of drawings, and we taped the best ones to the refrigerator until the refrigerator disappeared behind layers of color. Evelyn came every Saturday. She and Lily sat at the kitchen table with the colored pencils and drew together. Evelyn was terrible at drawing, which made Lily laugh so hard she slid off her chair. Lily called her Gigi. Evelyn called Lily my artist. Sometimes I'd hear them whispering to each other, and I'd stand in the kitchen doorway with a cup of coffee and just breathe. I started seeing a therapist in May. Priya recommended her, a woman named Dr. Kessler who specialized in family of origin trauma. I went not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand why I'd said, "Okay, Mom," for 29 years. That understanding came slowly, the way spring comes to Portland. Gray for a long time, and then suddenly everything blooming at once. Diane and Robert made their payments on time. I checked the trust account once a month and then closed the screen. They'd sold their house and moved into a one-bedroom apartment on the east side. I heard this from Rachel. I didn't feel satisfied. I didn't feel sorry. I felt okay. Kyle sent a text in August. 3 lines. "I'm sorry. I should have known. I should have done more." I read it. I didn't reply. Maybe someday I would. Maybe I wouldn't. That was my choice now. One evening in October, Lily was drawing at the table while I graded papers. She put down her pencil and looked up. "Mom, why didn't we always live here?" I set my pen down. I thought about it. Really thought. The way you do when a child asks you a question that deserves more than a reflex. Because sometimes it takes a while to find your way home, baby. But we're here now. And we're staying. She nodded. Satisfied. Went back to her drawing. I looked over her shoulder. It was the house again. Our house. But this time there were 3 figures standing in front of it. A tall one. A small one. And behind them, a shorter one with white hair and a big smile. I looked at that drawing for a long time. Then I smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't weigh anything. I used to think protecting my daughter meant keeping the peace. Swallowing the word no. Saying, "Okay, Mom," and hanging up and folding my hands and waiting for someone to notice I was drowning. Now I know. Protecting her means making sure she never has to question whether she deserves a home. She does. She always did. And now she has one. And that's where my story ends. And where our new life begins. If anything in this story stayed with you, if you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting your child, I want you to know you're not alone. And choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's the bravest thing you'll ever do. Thank you for staying all the way to the end. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a comment. What would you have done at that party? There's another story waiting for you in the description. I'll see you there.